Record mode. And right. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, our CAWASA Wednesday webinar, where we discuss from A to Z on water sector and wastewater sector. Today, we have a guest who has 30 years of work in the wastewater sector. In Africa, he's worked in the Middle East and Europe. He's a sales and technical advisor at Hycura and Acti-Zyme Products Limited. And he has been a technical advisor to municipalities and governments, hotels, abattoirs, NGOs, ships and boats and mines for processing sewage, creating biogas and obtaining electricity, liquid fertilizer, eliminating odours, pathogenic bacteria, and eliminating pollution in rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. So, Mr. Mike Craigen, welcome to our webinar.
Thank you.
And I will hand over to you.
Thanks very much. And thanks for that introduction. Valerie, thanks for the connection and allowing me to be here today. I thought that I would just generalize. We call it Poo Power. And in brackets, you will see in front of you lagoon anaerobic digestion for the capture of biogases and converting to electricity, and also the reuse of the treated water. If you want to start the... Okay. So we are taking the word waste out of wastewater, and we're doing it very keenly and very efficiently over in Africa at the moment. And we would like to make inroads into the Caribbean, because there are many of the islands who could use cheaper electricity. And so what we will do is consider the following. Mahatma Gandhi famously said this: the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but actually they're on loan from our children. So we have to hand over to them, at least as it was handed over to us. And what we have a situation, a fairly serious situation worldwide. The figures are astounding. There are over 250 million people pick up sickness and illnesses from coastal waters, or water in general, all over the world. And the deaths are incredible. So what we are trying to do is say, let's take the waste out of wastewater and reuse it. So I picked up from the Global Water Partnership Caribbean, the Jamaica case study. I'm sure all of you are aware of it, and whether you know the detail or not is immaterial. But here, they've recognized that the coverage of wastewater disposal in the Caribbean has changed, mostly for the better, since the early 2000s, with an overall increase in access to improved sanitation services. But we've got a long way to go. My study and research into this occasion has shown that there are many opportunities for things to get better. They're talking about, on average, around 97% of the population within 15 Caribbean countries have access to improved waste disposal. You, in your individual islands, etc., may argue that that's not the case, or that it's actually better. But they're suggesting 54% of households utilize septic tanks, 20% are using improved latrines, and 25% utilize the facilities connected to central sewage networks. And WHO, UNICEF, also indicated that there'd been an average increase of only 6.2% in the proportion of populations connected to sewer networks between 2016 and 19. And funnily enough, a 3.9% decrease in the proportion connected to septic tanks. So it's really accounted for by the likelihood of more central sewage networks and um, buildings being connected to them. So a long way to go, as I say, and we believe that efficient wastewater management, as they do, can provide immediate and intermediate and long-term benefits, both to health services for obvious reasons, less people getting ill, water and food security, and industry and ecosystems. And the quotation comes from Montut and Peters, 22. Therefore, seeing wastewater as a resource has cross-cutting multidimensional advantages across all sectors, and so true in the Caribbean, including tourism, agriculture, and aquaculture. You've got lots of people coming in diving off the various islands. You've got all the water sports. You've got your own fishing for food for the islands. And there is quite a lot of leisure fishing as well. And all of which are the cornerstone economic activities within Caribbean societies. And I have to say that if most of you know the analysis of coastal waters, of your rivers, of your water tables, it is likely that we're slowly poisoning the golden goose. That is the tourism, the surrounds of the islands being slowly polluted to death. And it has to stop. And one of the things that we're doing here today is advocating the use of the wastewater in a much bigger way. The next paragraph, and I don't like PowerPoints because they can bore people to death trying to read them as I read them, but you will see there, reduce untreated wastewater by aiming to cut half of the proportion of untreated wastewater by 2030. Now, all of you are experts in your field. You're experts in the area that you're employed, and only you can tell us really if you're on target. It's not so far away. 6 years' time, would we have cut half the proportion of untreated wastewater? The solution for the Caribbean, it says, states the World Bank, is that they're blessed with abundant renewable energy resources lying in accelerating the clean energy transition, talking about solar, talking about wind, but they're not necessarily talking about converting the sewage from the islands into power, which is what we're advocating. Wastewater management involves effective mechanisms of collection as well as treatment. And there I stop for a minute because the septic tanks on a lot of the islands aren't working properly. There's seepage into the water tables. People who are sinking boreholes will find quite often that there's pathogenic bacteria in the water table, which means that the clean, in inverted commas, cleaning water that they were, drinking water that they were hoping for is impossible. And how do you get rid of pathogenic bacteria in the water table? Well, our product does that, funnily enough. And, obviously there are very good regulatory actions and interventions if they work, if they're not ignored. So often we've found around the world that environmental agencies only really deal with things that are thrown in their faces. Quite often they don't show their teeth in the way that they should, because they are the custodians, if you like, of the laws of the country. In other words, follow the regulations and you're fine. But if you don't, we're going to fine you heavily, take you to court or whatever the case may be. And there are very few countries around the world where that's happening. Too often, because they're government employees, they shy away from causing any real ruckus. And what they should be doing is forcing people and organizations to follow the regulations a lot more closely. So the key elements of the wastewater management that they've decided upon is that there must be processing facilities. You'll see it in the black print here. Inclusive of collection, we have honeysucker trucks running all over the islands. Sometimes we don't, so it just overspills and seeps into the neighborhood ground. Paying attention to disposal and reuse, and the infrastructure and service systems. The point two, the important part of it is that there is implementation and oversight according to agreed national standards during processing. And then thirdly, the policy framework, the tools to manage processes and equipment during wastewater treatment, disposal, and reuse. Again, all over the world, we have found that banks lend at great cost capital to build wonderful trickle filter plants, etc. New aeration plants, adding on to what is already a struggling sewage treatment plant, and at great cost with great repayment terms, 30 years, 50-year repayments. When what we're advocating is quite simply to dig a hole in the ground, cover it, make it airtight in effect, and farm the biogas off the sewage. It works extremely well. It's cheap. You don't need electricity. Not initially. You don't need electricity to get the sewage into the lagoons. And we then farm that biogas, create electricity, and then on the islands, without exception, on all the Caribbean islands, the electricity is pretty expensive. And we would produce electricity that's at least quarter of the current cost of all the islands. And the other thing is that the islands wouldn't need to import the means to create the electricity. Quite often it's oil or coal or whatever. So, what we're saying is have a look at this as an alternative, clean alternative. So the water, environment, human health, food, renewable energy, all affected by using our product and our methodology. What if there is a very effective solution to treating sewage that is causing so much human health and environmental issues in so many parts of the world? That this solution is cost effective and can become self-financing. With most of the plants that we're working on at the moment, the payback period for communities as small as 200 people, the payback period is between 3 and 7 years. So forget the loans that talk about 30-year repayment, etc. Our payback period, because it becomes self-financing very quickly, is between 3 and 7 years. And apart from the fact that we can get communities to sell the electricity to the national grid at a far cheaper cost, okay, you've got the opportunity of farming the biogas itself and bottling it for cooking. And lastly, you've also got the opportunity to seek carbon credits globally. So there's dual revenue suddenly. You're either a community is either selling the biogas as biogas, selling the biogas as electricity, but also getting payments for carbon credits. Apart from the fact that environmentally, you're actually getting rid of the carbon footprint by farming that biogas. Now, our product, apart from becoming a self-financing entity, will also clean up rivers, polluted rivers and lakes. We've currently got a project on in Nairobi in Kenya, where 5 of the rivers that are going right through the capital are polluted to a huge extent. And we're working on that at the very beginning of it to clean up those rivers. We've had great success in Spain. We've had great success in Ghana. There are, there are preceding projects where we've cleaned up rivers, 200 kilometers of river that was basically pure sewage. And within 4 months, it was running water again. So our solution in both the anaerobic situations and the open water stuff is a complex range of patented bacteria and enzymes. I'm not going to stick on this too much. But because we are 70 plus years old, we're tried and tested. And so often we go into markets, and we haven't come to the Caribbean yet, but we go into markets where people say, oh, we've tried this product. We've had an enzyme product before. We've had bacteria products before, and they don't work. Well, many don't. I'm not saying that everyone does, but what we have is tried and tested in probably the harshest environment, Canada, and we have the product being used north of the Arctic Circle. Okay, and now we're making inroads into places like Mexico, Honduras, and over in Africa as well. We've had success in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean, and we're slowly getting there. The fact is that with the biogas availability, it's because we're accelerating the production of biogas, everything's happening quicker, and it becomes a far more cost-effective renewable energy. And apart from that, the effluent water becomes a nutrient-rich liquid fertilizer. And we've had measured by universities that the fertilizer, when applied to crops and applied to orchards, etc., creates a 20% increase in yield on those plants. Okay, and I've already mentioned that we can even provide the opportunity of selling carbon credits. So it's a win-win-win-win situation. Currently, lenders are giving away millions of dollars, as I've already mentioned, to build infrastructure that requires electricity, that requires maintenance, that requires skilled labor to manage the system. We've got a situation that happened in Botswana just this morning. Somebody designed a pump well in the central sewage system where access to the fog, as we call it, the fats, oils, and greases that build up in the pump station, the access is so difficult that it's impossible to see what's happening. What we're doing there is literally flooding the pump station with the activated product by dumping 20,000 liters off the back of a tanker truck. So quite often designs are not what they should be. You know, it's not a practical engineer or maintenance person that's designed the system, and that creates problems in itself. So as I say, lenders are giving away millions of dollars to build the infrastructure. It requires all those elements. And look at the sewage problems that many are now facing. Even septic tanks, in their greatest, expectation, septic tanks should work, but any overload that then seeps in to the ground, if there's a soakaway, any of the overload then begins to poison the ground. And we're advocating that we should, literally dam it up, cover it up, and use the byproduct of sewage to create electricity. So our product, when it speeds up the decomposition of the sewage or manure, because we've got great success with pig farms and cattle farms, the introduction of our product create in this in situ biogases are released more quickly, as I've said. It's logical and also essential to utilize this renewable energy. It's a resource with benefits to the environment. And the way we looked at it historically, we looked for a cost-effective approach. And we connected with a guy who, had he not been killed, sadly, in a car accident a few years back, would still be with us as one of the founding fathers of biogas farming. He had between 15,000 to 25,000 pigs, and he successfully, over a 31-year period, farmed the biogas and ran totally self-sufficient with his pig farming. He had all the power he needed, and in his own words, it's a lot cheaper to dig a deep hole and cover it than the expense of the above ground anaerobic digester systems. And he really was a pioneer in this, and was recognized in many countries. He talked around the world, and we followed his lead, and we thought, do you know what, this chap's on for something. And that's what's led us to talking to you today, for example. Okay, this was his system. It's a covered lagoon system, which was originally implemented in 1981, all those years back. And he advocated that the lagoon should be up to 8 meters because you're looking for anaerobic activity. And so many of the anaerobic ponds, built after tertiary treatment, for example, aren't as deep as that. So it's so simple at the beginning to make sure that an 8-meter deep hole is dug. And I know that there are some islands in the Caribbean that would find that difficult. I know, for instance, in the Grand Cayman, it's a very rocky base, and you would need to probably build it up from ground level. There is that opportunity to do something that is going to be able to survive the hurricanes that come in from time to time. But that was his setup. This is a thing in Zimbabwe, just to show you. On the left was the lagoon, which was so solid with sludge and dried sludge. It was so thick that you could walk on top of it. And we started treating it with the product. And there, after 4 months, is the same pond, which had water. And in fact, they introduced tilapia fish, the freshwater bream. And so now there is a source of protein from a lagoon because it's perfectly harmless, with the addition of our product. Our product does outperform pathogenic bacteria in any environment, whether it be rivers, whether it be the water table or whether it be coastal waters. So they will kill off the pathogenic bacteria because they outperform in eating away at the soft organic matter. So if the pathogenic bacteria don't have anything to survive on, they die away. So just to show you the use of Acti-Zyme and Hycura in a biogas treatment, this was a one-time application to pig manure. And what it shows you is the complete increase in the methane gas that was produced just with the one-time application. That bore people with the statistic, the factors at work. Okay. Here's a large application. This is a covered lagoon. You can see through the middle there, curving away, is a perforated pipe, which sucks in the gas, the methane gas. That's from a 9,000 herd dairy herd in California. And they've been using it for over 14 years and successfully running not only their dairy, but in this particular instance, they're producing the liquid petroleum gas from the biogas farming. So they're running their dairy trucks, the truck that deliver the milk to various centers. They're running them on LPG as well. So it's a win-win situation for them. That's how the small situation looks. The farming of the biogas, and in the background there's also the cogen, which converts it from methane to electricity. We remove the water and the hydrogen sulfide prior to entering the generator. So it's nice and neat and compact. That's the Waukesha engine that Roy Sharp used for over 30 years. It uses 100% biogas for its fuel source in producing electricity. And biogas collected contains approximately 65% to 70% methane. And to give you an idea, 10,000 people can produce approximately 1 million kilowatts or 1 megawatt of electricity a year. Note that there are many variables. However, this is a guide. And so one of the things up until a year ago, when we got really involved in smaller towns in Africa, was that you needed something over 100,000 people. That was the general consensus in the marketplace. We need, something that's big and really worthwhile. Well, actually, we're now down to 200 people, and we probably will be able to do it for 100 people. So we can take small villages around the Caribbean islands and say, look, if we can collect your sewage, we'll be able to produce cheap electricity for you. Because I know that when I've read reports of the Caribbean islands, a lot of people are suffering because of the cost of electricity, and they're having to do without it. So that's an indication of where we're going with this. And that, good people, is my delivery on getting electricity from poo. Okay. The wastewater should be part of a circular economy. And if we needed any examples of that, that's what we're doing. We're literally taking waste and using it as a resource, reducing above and underground water pollution, It's so important. We're cleaning up the water tables in areas. Um, I'll give you an example. In Kenya, these 5 rivers that go through Nairobi, downstream from there is the famous Masai Mara game park. And the wildlife share the river with the Masai, who take the cattle to drink at the river. And a few weeks back, the cattle actually refused to drink the water. That's how bad it's got. So when cattle instinctively will not drink the water, then it's time to decide that actually Mahatma Gandhi's um, request, his statement, we have to leave it to our children the way we found it, is actually being lost. Okay. And when using municipal sewage to generate electricity, it provides an income and allows for the application of carbon offsets, as I've spoken about. We've got liquid fertilizer. We're getting increased crop yields and an increase in protein in the grain. Carbon credits can be claimed on the global market. We operate with a German carbon credit company that is very successful and gets the highest price in the market for us. And so clearly and simply, sewage becomes an asset and not a cost. And that's how it should be. And that's how we want it to be in all the islands in the Caribbean. Quite simply, taking the waste out of wastewater. And that is us concluded. I'm very open to answering any questions, please.
Right. Thank you very much, Mike, for sharing your experiences with us. We'll now open the floor to the other participants, should they have any questions for you from this very comprehensive presentation.
Thank you.
Well, I think you first spoke about well, not first, but one of the issues that often comes up when we speak about making use of waste to fertilizer and to use on crops is to do with the risk factors of pathogens into crops and into the food chain. What are some of the mitigation measures that you would have?
Well, in general, when our product is used in the maintenance, so we've shocked the system, we've cleaned it up, we're using it on a maintenance basis. The pathogenic bacteria are reduced to a safe level. So we wouldn't advocate pouring water on top of lettuce, for example. But in irrigating the crops, commercial crops, orchards, etc., it would be fine. Because as I described, in the rivers, in the coastal waters, in the water table, our product will outperform the pathogenic bacteria. And therefore, in most situations, after a few months of maintenance treatment, any analysis that's done will find that the pathogenic bacteria is next to zero. So that's the mitigating circumstance. That the product, you see, the product is made of 74 strains of bacteria. And to get it, put it simply, those bacteria have been found in polluted environments. So they've been farmed off from situations. And because they have been, they're now, whatever environment they're applied to, they are very successful. Okay, so some may be more acclimatized very quickly to a particular environment than others within the 74 bacterial strains. But amongst them all, the fact is that they will outperform the pathogenic bacteria.
Here we have a question in the chat from Mr. Erwin Gill in Trinidad. He asks, he says, biogas is toxic. In the US, there were reports in quality of life and possible mental disorders. How do you handle these challenges?
Okay, we always clean the gas before it's compressed or used. What we're withdrawing from the system, farming from the system, is methane gas. Okay, the others are either burnt off or buried, in effect. Okay, and there is no, situation where they would suffer, that there would be any suffering from that. I don't quite know what those reports are. If we're talking about using the biogas, it's methane. Okay. If we're talking about it in compressed bottles, gas bottles for cooking, they're burning off the methane that's in the bottle. Does that answer the question?
Well, I suppose Gil could let us know, but please, if there are other questions, please proceed. Valerie, do you?
I was just going to say on that question, I mean, there are a good number of Canadian utilities that I know of that do convert their biogas or their gases from the treatment plant and use it very successfully. They heat or the electricity for the whole of the wastewater operations, which in a municipality is the #1 electricity power user of anything in the wastewater treatment system, but all of it is now coming from the wastewater treatment plant, as well as them heating a number of schools in the area. Many of you will have taken training, I think, from Mike Goslin from the city of Kelowna, and that's the plant that he's sometimes talked to you about on this webinar that he gave, that does exactly that.
Yeah.
I would be interested to know, Mike, though, where you're working in Kenya, because we've got 2 of our volunteers going over there to teach wastewater in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, we're currently dealing with Busia, Bungoma, Kisumu, and Chance.
Okay.
Okay. Before I take, oh, sorry, I didn't realize.
I was gonna say, Valerie, we can certainly connect to our 2 guys that are out there at the moment. That would be nice. There may be the ability to integrate together over there, because we've got some very practical things happening with the university in Kisumu for the Western area, and so the teaching element might like to join there in certain aspects. There may be scope for co-working together.
Right. So, Mike, I've got 2 hands raised. Just before I ask this,
Sure.
I will ask, and I have some questions in the chat as well. I'll have Kevin Carter first, and then Derwin Valley. Proceed.
Thank you,
Kevin.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thanks, Ignatius. Thank you. Thanks, Mike, for a great presentation. I love seeing the sentence, taking the word waste out of wastewater. I think that's the right mindset as we go forward. Kevin Carter, I'm in South Florida. Could you build a little bit on the carbon credit and how that works? I mean, how does the utility get the credit back, or does it go to the parent government? And just sort of the interaction there.
Sure. Okay. It needs to be audited by a third party. So there needs to be confirmation that the entity is farming off X thousand cubic meters of methane gas per year. And with that independent party audit, the German company that we're working with then sells it onto the global market. That's how it works. Is that simple enough, or do you want me to go into more detail? It simply is. It needs to be audited. So we could claim, let's say, in the Kasumu sewage treatment plant, that we're farming off 100,000 cubic meters per year. Well, we could say that, but in order to authenticate it all, there is a third party comes in, audits it, sees that we've got the equipment to measure the cubic meters farmed, and then approves it. And subject to that approval, then the carbon credits are sold on the global market. Got it.
Now, I was just thinking, if you're a utility starting from scratch, and then that was one of your goals, what would be your end result and how to get there? So that helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Derwin, please.
Hi, afternoon. Derwin Valley from Trinidad. Couple of questions. A great presentation too, as far as the applicability of using wastewater in a monetary sense or monetary gain, which will lead into the question, and it's part of what the question the fellow guy just asked. What's the logistics of you implementing? So you do an audit as far as how much biogas is being produced in a particular system, and you say, it will only be applicable for, let's just say, 1 million gallons or cubic feet per day or any particular period, because I know it's a business. And two, also, is it localized to any particular system? Because you have systems that produce biogas, for more anaerobic and lagoons and stuff. Have you had instances where you have, let's just say, extended aeration treatment systems or aerobic treatment systems? You've worked on them also. Even also, you've also talked about municipal. What about private entities? Have you worked in those particular areas?
No, we haven't worked in private entities. Up until now, we're talking about municipal. Good question. Do we look at aerobic plants? What we would advocate is building a series of lagoons, ponds, in parallel. In Kisumu in Kenya, they've got the tertiary treatment, the trickle filter system, okay? And in order for us to do what we want to do, we have advocated and they have accepted that we would build the 3-pond system right alongside the current sewage treatment system. And when the day goes and we say, right, we're ready to roll, the pipes will then be fed into the lagoon system, which will then fill up and will allow us to farm the biogas. Because, and they're not peculiar, they've spent another $38 million trying to expand the sewage treatment plant that they have. And what they're doing is just doubling the size of the problem. We go back to Roy Sharp, rest his soul, God rest his soul. He advocated you don't need anything more complicated than a hole in the ground, 8 meters deep, cover it, farm off the biogas. I mentioned Botswana in Francistown this morning. They've got this pump station which continually blocks. Sure, there are areas all over the world where you will have a series of pump stations. But what we're saying is let's keep it as simple as possible. Holes in the ground, cover them, seal them, farm the biogas, give cheap electricity or biogas back to the community, and let them thrive in it. I'll give you a figure as a guideline. One particular municipality in Kenya, the maintenance budget they were given from central government for the maintenance of the sewer system is $38,000 equivalent. By farming the biogas and producing the electricity and selling it onto the national grid, their income will be north of $250,000 per year. And in the situation they're in, because there's a lot of unplanned communities, some people call them shanty compounds, we've got women being raped and kids being raped most nights because they're going to the latrines and there's no street lights. What we're looking at ahead is to put street lighting in. We're looking at putting irrigation pipe for the effluent water to water areas where the communities can grow all year round crops to feed themselves. So we're empowering the community through their own poo to make improvements like they've never seen before. And the same will happen in the Caribbean. There are communities that would really thrive on being given this opportunity.
Right. So we have 2 questions in the chat. There was a continuation from Mr. Gill in Trinidad who asked, in cleaning up the biogas, waste is produced, what do you do with it? And I think a similar question from Karen Martinez is, can you give more details on the process to remove carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide and the efficiency? And how is the carbon dioxide used in captured and sold? Is it captured and sold? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not my area of expertise, but I have the knowledge that we have cleaning system, filtration systems, and with the noxious gas, like CO2, it will be burnt off. So it's farmed off before the methane gas is captured, and farmed off, burnt. And there are other methods of burying it underground, as I say, I'm not an expert on that, but we do very surely and assuredly get rid of any of the gases not required to keep the methane pure, if you like, because the cogens operate on a pure input of methane. If they get dirty gas, if you like, they very quickly choke up. So it's in the interest of having the filtration system. I could send details of the sort of thing that we use, if I'm allowed to. If we're able to send this slideshow, for example, and any other complementary information that you might enjoy, I could send details of that.
Yeah, you could send it. I'll put my email in the chat, and also because this is recorded, I think you registered for the session, so I'll get your email and you'll find mine, so you can send it to me, and I can circulate to the participants.
That's wonderful. I'm just wondering, did that answer the question? Because it came from 2 people. What do we do with the unwanted gases? Yes.
Well, I haven't seen a response in the chat room. They can pick up on their microphones, but that it's all clear. Are there any other questions that you have for?
Yes, hi. This is Augustus from Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, just was curious about the size of the system. Can it be, scaled down for, let's say, a very small community, or even a resident, a household? I just missed a certain section of of the electricity. So
Yeah.
let me know.
There would be no, if you're talking about electricity, we've got it down to 200 people, okay, that we could provide enough electricity to make it worthwhile. So it would be local use, okay? On a domestic situation, you would only go as far as producing biogas, enough to maybe cook or heat. I don't suppose there's heating required in Trinidad, but certainly for cooking, at a domestic level, yes.
Definitely. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, likewise, I meant to ask about that because you, in the opening, you stated the scale at which you operate these plants. And it seems to me that in presenting some of the statistics out of the Caribbean, as you well pointed out, we still depend heavily on individual sewage septic tanks. And not on the central sewage collection and treatment systems. So in this context, what sort of scale that you would require? Is it possible on these smaller scales to do so, or do you need, because you're speaking about large numbers, to get to the sort of quantities of methane you would produce to maybe provide electricity in a community, etc.?
Yeah, good question. We've if I can use Kenya again, we've got a situation there where 15,000 people are part of the central sewage system, but sewage from another 10,000 equivalent comes in by honeysucker truck, okay, and they pick up from septic tanks out in the countryside, and they bring it into the central system, and they release it into the central system. So although there's only 15,000 connected to the central system, there's another 10,000 people accounting for moving up to 25,000 people equivalent. Okay, so one of the things that it has encouraged them to be sure that they get their sewage collected is the idea that their electricity will be cheaper in the future. So work with us so that we can provide you with cheaper electricity. And that's one of the things that might be considered in the Caribbean, is to incentivize them by saying, look, unless you do this, we're not going to be able to get you the cheaper electricity. Because it should be probably less than the 20th of the current cost, the electricity, even when we've linked it up to the national grid.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, in theory and the concept, given your experiences in Africa and some other regions, I think some of our challenges in terms of electricity supply in many of the Caribbean countries would require a lot of policy changes and legislative changes to accommodate, although that's a lot of work in progress towards incorporating renewables onto our system as we look at broader climate issues. But certainly, yes, it will require that kind of partnership.
Sure, I would say, globally again, there's a lot of talk about the fact that solar power and wind power are, environmentally friendly. We would argue that actually they're not so friendly. We've got carcasses of solar power here in the UK already. Their shelf life, if you like, is less than 20 years. And what you've got is incomplete solar farms that are slowly breaking down. So they're about as much of an eyesore as you could ever get. And same with the wind power. We've got offshore wind farms here that are causing problems already. So again, we would say to the banks of the Caribbean, have a look at this as an environmentally friendly option. You know, we're increasing the cyclical economy by producing cheap electricity, better food options, better food yields, and the probability of additional income in the form of carbon credits that the communities can use. It's it's a no-brainer, really.
Well, certainly, I think a lot of food for thought, and we can always continue into a much broader conversation. But I think it's good that I think biogas digesters are not new into the Caribbean, but mainly it has been promoted in the agricultural sector and not necessarily from the sewage sector directly. So I think it's all sharing that type of information of what the possibilities are for the future. And the policy makers can always sit and the technical people can get into greater discussion and engagement with providers like yourself.
Sure. So we would love to be able to do a single template example on each of the islands and say to the government, come and look, see. You know, what we say can happen is happening, but you should be multiplying this by X, you know, through your population. That's, you know, we've got areas in the Philippines where latrines are being built and are overflowing, and our product makes that null and void because the product eats all the organic matter, and it makes it a lot more attractive for people to use the latrines because you don't get flies because there's no odors, and you've got a cleaner effluent at the bottom of the latrines. So it's as simple as from there through to producing electricity. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, we'd like to, I don't see any other questions in the chat room, and I think we are smack back onto 5:05 where we started at 4:05.
Wonderful.
And we would like to thank you very much for sharing your vast knowledge of this technology with us. And we trust that of course, it's been recorded and we will share with across the spectrum of our partners and the participants. All right, so I'd like to thank you, Valerie, for making the connection. And thank you, Mike, and all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Ignatius Young, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Water and Sewage Association, based in St. Lucia. And if it's Wednesday, it's CAWASA Wednesday Webinar, where we speak from A to Z on water and wastewater sector. And we'd like to thank all of you for joining. See you again.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Soon. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Bye, everybody.